The wind on the high plains of Wyoming Territory in 1881 could scour the hide off a steer and the hope off a man. Elias Caldwell felt it every morning when he stepped out of his log house and looked east toward the ridge where 7 small crosses stood in a crooked line. 7 times Sarah had carried life inside her. 7 times the bleeding came too early, or the fever, or the cruel stillness that followed a too quiet birth. The last one took Sarah herself. After they lowered her pine box into the frozen ground, Elias quit speaking altogether. Words felt like coins he no longer had the right to spend. He rode into the sorry cluster of buildings called Bitter Creek only when the coffee or salt ran out. Folks nodded out of habit, then remembered he wouldn't answer and looked away. Children called him the ghost rancher. Preacher tried once to read scripture over the empty pew Elias sat in. Elias simply rose and left, spurs ringing like a funeral bell. One December noon, a wagon with a broken wheel limped into town. A woman in a ragged bonnet was beating a girl with a willow switch while the girl tried to shield her swollen belly. The woman's voice carried the rasp of cheap whiskey. "Worthless! Can't even pull your weight no more." The girl, barely 17, face bruised, eyes already old, didn't cry out. She only curled around the child she carried like a mother badger guarding her young. Elias sat his horse at the hitch rail, meaning to ride on. Then the woman spat, "Anybody want her? 8 months gone, still strong enough to work. $5 or a jug of trade whiskey and she's yours." A couple of cowhands laughed. One reached for his pocket in jest. The girl's eyes, green as new sage after rain, met Elias's for one heartbeat. In them was every animal he'd ever seen caught in a trap: terror, rage, and the cold decision to chew its own leg off if it had to. Something cracked inside the place Elias's heart used to be. He stepped down, dug in his vest, and laid $3 silver and a stone crock of his own corn liquor in the woman's palm. She bit the coins, grinned with brown teeth, and climbed back on the wagon. The wheels screeched. She was gone before the dust settled. The girl stood alone in the street, one hand on the knife under her apron, the other cradling her belly. Snow started to fall in thick, silent flakes. Elias pointed to his horse. "Get on!" She didn't move. He sighed, a sound like wind through dead grass, and turned the horse toward home, reins loose on the saddle horn. After 10 paces he looked back. She was following, 10 feet behind, limping but stubborn. He never hurried the horse. She never closed the gap. That was how Clara Meeker came to the ranch in the valley of the Little Medicine Bow. He gave her Sarah's room, the one with the 4-poster bed and the lace curtains now grey with dust. He carried in a plate of beans and cornbread, set it on the dresser, knocked once on the open door, and left. Every morning he left food. Every night he banked the fire, and never once crossed her threshold without knocking. When her time drew near, he left clean sheets and a basin of hot water outside the door, like offerings to a spirit he was afraid to anger. Clara waited for the monster to show itself. She slept with the knife under her pillow and woke at every creak of the house, but the monster never came. Some nights she heard Elias on the porch, boot heels slow on the planks, back and forth until the coyotes quit singing, as if walking kept the ghosts from catching him. 3 weeks in she found the little graveyard. The crosses were whittled from cedar, each no longer than her forearm. Names and dates carved with a steady hand. Sarah Caldwell, beloved wife, died January 14th, 1879. Then the babies. Mercy, stillborn. Hope lived 6 hours. Grace lived 2 days. Faith, Charity, Prudence, little Luke. None of them saw a full moon. Clara stood there until her feet went numb in the snow. When she came back inside, Elias was at the stove stirring oatmeal. For the first time she spoke. "I'm sorry about your children." He froze, spoon dripping. After a long minute he nodded once and went on stirring. That was their first conversation. The town talked, of course. A silent man buys a breeding girl and keeps her in his dead wife's room. Of course he's using her. The preacher preached against fornication. Women crossed themselves when Clara walked past the store, though she only came in twice, clutching Elias's money like it might bite her. One Sunday in February, the gossip turned mean. Mrs. Gantry at the Mercantile refused Clara service. "We don't serve whores here." Clara left the flour and bacon on the counter and walked out proud, but inside she was shaking. That night she packed a flour sack with jerked beef and a blanket. She waited until the house was dark, slipped out the window, and started walking south through knee-deep snow. Anywhere was better than waiting for the day Elias woke up mean. She made it 2 miles before the first pain doubled her over, then another. The moon was a thin blade overhead, and the wind cut like a skinning knife. She sank down beside a cedar, knife in one hand, the other pressed to her belly, and knew she was going to die out here with her baby. Hoofbeats, slow, deliberate. Elias rode up on the big bay, leading her mare already saddled. He dismounted, took in the sack, the knife, the snow crusting her eyelashes. He didn't speak, simply swung her up into his arms like she weighed nothing and set her on the mare. When she tried to slide off, he caught the reins and started walking back, leading both horses. The pain came hard and fast now. She bit her lip bloody so she wouldn't cry out. Half a mile from the house he stopped, looked up at her pale face in the moonlight, and said the first full sentence she'd ever heard from him. "I ain't him, Clara. Whoever done you wrong, I ain't him." She started sobbing then, great ugly sobs that shook her whole body. He walked the rest of the way with one hand steady on her knee so she wouldn't fall. Spring came late and angry that year. A lightning strike up in the Medicine Bow Range started a fire that burned hotter than sin. By July it had eaten half the territory and was running toward the valley like a freight train made of flame. Elias saw the smoke at dawn, a black wall from horizon to horizon. He started loading the wagon, seed corn, the milk cow, the strongbox with Sarah's wedding ring and the deed. Clara, heavy again though she hadn't told him yet, helped where she could. Then the wind shifted hard and the fire jumped the creek. In minutes the grass was ablaze. "There's no time," Elias shouted, the second time she'd ever heard his voice raised. "Stone hut on the ridge, fire break there, go!" He boosted her onto the bay bareback. She kicked the horse hard, bent low over her belly, but another pain hit and she slid off into the dust. The heat was already blistering. Embers rained like hellfire. Elias scooped her up, threw her across the front of his saddle, and kneed the big gelding into a dead run. Flames roared on both sides, 20 feet high, sucking the air from their lungs. The horse screamed and bolted blind. Elias wrapped one arm around Clara and hung on. They burst into the clearing around the old trapper's hut. Stone walls, sod roof, a patch of bare dirt the fire couldn't cross. Elias kicked the door open, carried Clara inside, and dropped to his knees, coughing black phlegm. The world outside was orange and deafening. Her water broke across the packed earth floor. "No, not now," she gasped. "Reckon the baby don't much care about now," Elias said, voice raw from smoke. He barred the door, soaked blankets in the rain barrel, hung them over the windows. Then he rolled up his sleeves, washed his hands in the last of the water, and knelt between her feet like a man who'd done this before, and lost every time. Hours blurred. The fire screamed outside like a living thing. Inside there was only Clara's cries, Elias's low, steady voice counting, praying, cursing when she thought she couldn't do it anymore. He held her hand so hard she felt bones grind. "Push, girl, you're stronger than the fire. Push." At the height of the roar, when the roof beams began to smoke, a new cry split the world, thin, fierce, impossible. Elias lifted the slick, squalling baby clear of the blanket, stared a moment like he couldn't believe she was real, then laid her on Clara's chest. The child had a mop of dark hair and lungs like a blacksmith's bellows. Outside, the fire crowned in the pines and moved on, leaving the hut in a circle of black desolation. Elias tried to stand and pitch forward. Smoke had done for him. His lips were blue, eyes rolling back. Clara, half dead herself, dragged him close, put the baby on his bare chest, skin to skin. "Breathe, damn you!" she ordered through cracked lips. "She needs a papa, and I ain't raising her alone." The baby rooted, latched on to nothing, and let out an indignant yell that would have shamed a banshee. Elias's eyes snapped open. He sucked in a ragged breath that sounded like a soul being dragged back across the threshold, wrapped one shaking hand around the child, and cried, great silent sobs that shook them all. They named her Rose because nothing should have lived through that day, yet there she was. A year later the valley was green again, stubborn grass pushing through the ash. Real roses, Sarah's cuttings Elias had carried out of the house that night wrapped in wet blankets, grew wild along the new fence line, red as fresh blood, sweet as forgiveness. The house rang now. Rose toddled from room to room calling, "Papa!" in a voice that made Elias's eyes shine every time. Clara, big again with their second, sang hymns while she churned butter. Neighbors who once whispered now rode out with salt pork and apologies, hats in hand. There was no preacher within 50 miles willing to marry a man and the girl he'd bought, and Elias said paper didn't matter much when you'd already pulled each other out of hell. One evening Elias came in from the corral, sweat-streaked and smiling at something Rose had done. Clara met him at the door, pressed a single red rose into his calloused hand. "For the quiet you wanted," she said softly. He looked around at the noise, Rose banging a spoon on the table, the dog barking, Clara humming, and laughed out loud for the first time in 8 years. "Reckon I was wrong," he said. "Some quiet ain't worth having." Outside, the 7 little crosses on the ridge stood watch over a land healed and blooming. And if you ride past the Caldwell place at dusk, you'll smell wood smoke and supper and roses, and you'll hear a man's deep laugh answer a woman's and a child's high one, bright as bells across the new grass. Some things even fire can't burn out. Some graves love can make fertile again. And sometimes, out here where the wind is cruel and the earth stingy, 2 broken people can still plant a garden no one thought would grow, especially roses. If this story moved your heart the way it still moves mine, go ahead and tap that hype button, leave a comment, and subscribe to Western Tales.